Joe Rogan sat across from his guest, his expression unusually serious, the air in his studio heavy with unspoken tension. Viewers could sense it instantly, something was about to drop. The conversation had started as a casual talk about celebrity culture and media hypocrisy. But within minutes, Joe took a sudden turn that no one saw coming. He leaned into the mic, his voice low but cutting through the silence with precision. "You ever wonder," he began, "why nobody talks about Ellen anymore? Especially after all this Diddy stuff came out." The studio went still. His guest froze, half laughing, unsure if Rogan was joking. But Joe's eyes didn't flinch. He was dead serious. Within hours, that one clip exploded across social media. Joe Rogan exposes Ellen DeGeneres' connection to Diddy case trended on X. Fans were confused, then fascinated. What did he mean by that? Was Ellen somehow tied to the same Hollywood secrets the media was now trying to bury? Comment sections flooded with speculation. Some insisted Joe was hinting at something deeper, that Ellen had quietly vanished from public life because she knew too much. Others argued it was just Rogan stirring the pot again, pushing the conversation into dangerous territory. But the silence from Ellen's camp made things worse. Not a word, not even a denial. That's when fans started digging, connecting dots between Ellen's sudden disappearance, Diddy's ongoing scandals, and a string of high-profile friendships that had once seemed harmless but now looked suspiciously coordinated. The timeline didn't lie. Ellen's talk show ended abruptly, her staff went quiet, and her Hollywood circle slowly dissolved. Then came the resurfaced photos, Ellen laughing with Diddy at exclusive after-parties, whispering to him backstage at the Grammys, even attending his private gatherings that few outsiders ever saw. Suddenly, Joe's question didn't sound random anymore. It sounded like a warning. In one viral clip, a fan zoomed in on Rogan's expression after making that remark. He paused, gave a knowing half smile, and muttered, "People act like she just retired. But trust me, no one just disappears in this business." The internet lost its mind. Reddit threads exploded with theories. Former guests from Elon's show began trending again, as old interviews were dissected for hidden meanings. Clips of Ellen's nervous laughter when certain names were mentioned, Diddy, Oprah, even Clive Davis, started circulating like wildfire. Something in her tone suddenly seemed off, rehearsed, even fearful. And while mainstream outlets avoided the topic altogether, smaller YouTube channels and podcasts latched onto it, painting a picture that grew darker by the hour. Some claimed Ellen had been silenced. Others whispered she was part of something much bigger, a network of powerful figures who once controlled Hollywood's image, until it all started cracking. Rogan's remark, it seemed, wasn't a random observation at all. It was a spark thrown into a dry forest of old secrets. The question now wasn't if Ellen was involved, but why no one dared to mention her name anymore. And as Joe's words kept echoing across millions of feeds, one thing became certain. Hollywood wasn't ready for the storm his single sentence had just unleashed. Joe Rogan's studio lights dimmed slightly, casting a faint glow over the table as the cameras kept rolling. His face caught somewhere between curiosity and disbelief. That single remark about Ellen DeGeneres had already stirred a storm online. But what people didn't know was that Joe hadn't even scratched the surface of what he'd heard behind the scenes. It all started when one of his old comedy friends mentioned a private list circulating among Hollywood insiders. A list of names that had quietly gone off the radar ever since the Diddy scandal broke. Ellen's was one of the first. Joe had laughed it off at first, thinking it was just another internet rumor, until a week later, he received a message from a former producer of The Ellen Show who told him, flat out, "You're closer to the truth than you think." That one sentence stayed in Joe's mind, and now, sitting across from his guest, he couldn't hold back anymore. As the conversation rolled, Joe began connecting dots. Not in the way the media does, but the way only someone deeply skeptical of Hollywood could. He said that after Diddy's empire started falling apart, a lot of people who were once untouchable suddenly started hiding. He brought up how Ellen's final season was filled with awkward energy, nervous smiles, and forced jokes, as if she was counting the days to escape. Fans at the time thought she was simply tired of the spotlight, but Joe hinted there was more. He recalled hearing whispers that Elon's departure wasn't voluntary, that certain names tied to her production company were under quiet investigation long before Diddy's legal troubles became public. As Joe's guest listened, trying not to interrupt, Joe leaned back and said, "Look, Hollywood is like a club. When one member falls, they all start cleaning up." His words hit hard. Viewers replayed that clip endlessly, noticing the conviction in his voice. Meanwhile, Twitter erupted with people digging through old interviews, especially one where Ellen avoided a question about her friendship with Diddy. nervously changing the subject to puppies and dancing. Back then, it seemed harmless, but now it looked calculated. Former staff members from her show began speaking up again, claiming there were unwritten rules about which guests they could and couldn't mention, and that Diddy's name was quietly banned in the final months before cancellation. This revelation sent fans into chaos. One TikTok user uploaded a montage of Elon's celebrity interactions, pointing out how she always seemed uncomfortable whenever certain industry parties were mentioned. The comments filled with wild theories. Some believed Ellen had inside knowledge of what was happening behind closed doors, while others thought she'd tried to distance herself too late. But what truly set things ablaze was when a former audience coordinator from The Ellen Show posted a cryptic video saying, "You guys don't even know the half of it. If Joe Rogan knew what we saw off camera, he wouldn't be asking why no one talks about her, he'd be asking who told her to stay quiet." Within hours, that clip hit 1 million views and disappeared mysteriously, taken down for violating community guidelines. Yet the internet never forgets. Screenshots, re-uploads, and stitched reactions kept it alive. Joe's podcast became the center of speculation, and every upcoming guest was expected to comment on it. Some refused, saying they didn't want to get involved in that mess. Others hinted that there was definitely something weird about Elon's exit from the public eye. One guest, an anonymous insider who requested not to be filmed, described Ellen as trapped between loyalty and fear. They said she had been part of a circle that included powerful executives and artistspeople who were now being questioned or quietly distancing themselves from Diddy. As Joe listened to this account, he said almost under his breath, "It's strange how the same faces keep showing up in every major scandal." The guest nodded, but didn't elaborate. It was enough. Fans started pulling up archival photos of Ellen attending exclusive after-parties, hosted by Diddy in the mid-2010s, including one from 2017 where she was seen leaving a venue minutes before a police raid. At the time, no one thought twice. But with the current context, the narrative shifted completely. People began speculating that Elon's entire public breakdown in 2020, the staff accusations, the cancelled show, her sudden withdrawal wasn't just bad press, but part of a bigger plan to disappear before certain stories resurfaced. And the more Joe talked about it, the more everyone started to believe there was a layer of truth hidden in plain sight. What made things even more intense was a leaked voicemail allegedly between two TV executives discussing how Ellen needs to stay out of sight until the noise dies down. Though its authenticity was never proven, it circulated widely, feeding the frenzy. The mainstream press stayed silent, but independent outlets started asking why a figure as massive as Ellen DeGeneres could vanish without a trace. Joe addressed this on his next episode, saying, "Look, I'm not accusing anyone. I'm just saying, when the world stops mentioning someone that famous, it's not because they retired, it's because someone made a call." His words were calm, but the internet took them as confirmation. Comments poured in from fans who claimed to have met Ellen at charity events in the past year, saying she looked different, nervous, and constantly checking her phone. Some said she refused to take pictures, something unthinkable for the once camera-loving host. Theories spread like wildfire that Ellen was under some kind of NDA or protection deal, similar to what people speculated about Diddy's former associates. Others said she'd relocated outside the US, quietly selling off properties in California under shell companies. By now, Joe's passing question had turned into a full-blown online investigation, one that the public couldn't look away from. The conversation spilled beyond Joe's podcast. Late-night hosts started making subtle jokes about Ellen going off the grid, while influencers dissected her last public appearance at a restaurant in Montecito, where she appeared pale, tired, and wearing oversized glasses. One paparazzi asked if she had spoken to Diddy lately, and she gave a cold smile, replying only, "That's not my world anymore." That short clip reignited everything. Joe Rogan's followers shared it with captions like "She knows something" and "Hollywood silence is never random." The media tried to redirect attention, but fans were relentless, comparing Ellen's pattern to others who'd gone quiet after scandals linked to Diddy's social circle. Behind the scenes, Joe's team reportedly received a warning email from an unnamed source advising them to drop the Ellen topic before it gets messy. Joe mentioned it on air without reading the details, but his tone said enough. "Funny how people tell you to stop asking questions right when you're getting close," he said, half smiling. That comment added gasoline to the fire. Overnight, his clip was everywhere again, now labeled "Joe Rogan threatened after exposing Hollywood silence." And for the first time, Joe didn't deny it. He simply said, "I've been in this business long enough to know when someone's scared. And trust me, Ellen's not the only one hiding." By the end of that week, fans were piecing together every bit of circumstantial evidence they could find: old interviews, canceled guest lists, production delays, and connections that stretched from record labels to daytime television. The pattern was undeniable. Joe Rogan had asked one question, but it opened a corridor of memories Hollywood wanted buried. And somewhere out there, Ellen DeGeneres, once America's favorite host, was sitting quietly, watching her name return to headlines she had spent years avoiding. As the days went by, Joe Rogan's single remark grew into a cultural wildfire, spreading across podcasts, YouTube channels, and gossip pages faster than anyone could control. Every hour brought a new theory, a new clip, a new alleged insider claiming to know the real story behind Ellen's silence. Joe himself seemed both surprised and fascinated by how fast it escalated, but part of him also knew it was inevitable. Hollywood had a way of pretending everything was fine until someone poked the wrong nerve. In this case, Joe's question was that nerve. His next podcast opened with him shaking his head, laughing softly before saying, "I didn't mean to start a witch hunt, but I think people are waking up." Yet, even that casual statement added fuel to the flames. The comments flooded in thousands of viewers, urging Joe to keep digging and not back down. Some said they'd stopped trusting mainstream outlets altogether. Others claimed that Joe was being targeted, shadowbanned, even silenced himself. What made things even wilder was the sudden reappearance of Ellen's old colleagues, producers, writers, and celebrity guests, each giving cryptic or contradictory statements that only deepened the mystery. One former staff member appeared on a podcast, saying that the final season of the Ellen DeGeneres show had been chaos behind the curtains. According to them, Ellen was frequently distracted, taking long phone calls in her dressing room and refusing to share what they were about. She looked scared, they said, like she'd seen something she wasn't supposed to. Soon, rumors began surfacing about files, video footage, and private correspondence that Ellen allegedly kept locked away. Evidence that linked her to a much bigger story involving powerful names in entertainment, politics, and finance, some of the same people mentioned in the Diddy scandal. Joe, always careful to avoid direct accusations, simply repeated what he found strange. "Isn't it weird that someone with that much influence just vanished?" And not a single journalist asked why. That question changed everything. Reddit forums lit up again, with users dissecting Ellen's timeline like detectives. They noted how her last public charity event had been quietly canceled, how her name was removed from certain Hollywood guest lists, and how her social media posts suddenly stopped. Fans who had followed her for years said her last Instagram caption felt like a goodbye. Sometimes, stepping away is the only way forward. At the time, it seemed poetic. Now, it felt chilling. One night, Joe received an anonymous email with the subject line, "You're right about her." The message had no name, no contact information, just a single sentence, "It's not just Diddy," and she was warned. Joe mentioned this briefly on his show, and his guest, a well-known actor, visibly tensed up. "Man, you don't want to go there," the actor said nervously, trying to change the subject. Joe didn't push, but the audience noticed his expression. His curiosity had deepened into quiet resolve. Meanwhile, fan-made documentaries began appearing online, weaving together every scrap of information available. One particularly viral video, titled "Ellen's Hidden Hollywood Ties," drew millions of views overnight. It featured archival clips of Ellen joking with Diddy during a 2015 interview, where they exchanged a knowing glance after a question about parties. Under normal circumstances, it was harmless banter. Now, every frame looked suspicious. The video ended with a dramatic theory that Ellen's downfall had been orchestrated to protect others higher up the chain. Joe didn't comment directly on that video, but when asked by a fan during a live Q&A if he thought Ellen had been taken out, he paused for several seconds and replied, "Let's just say, some people retire, and others get retired." That line became iconic, repeated across platforms, turned into memes, reaction videos, even merch. Still, beneath the entertainment and speculation, there was a strange sense of unease growing among the public. It wasn't just about Ellen or Diddy anymore, it was about the pattern. Celebrities disappearing, stories being buried, careers ending without closure. Joe spoke about that phenomenon often, saying that Hollywood had mastered the art of making scandals vanish through distraction. "You give people a new show, a new headline, and they forget," he said. But not this time. His listeners agreed. The more Hollywood tried to stay silent, the louder the noise grew online. One night, Joe received a direct message from an old acquaintance who had once worked security for major award shows. "You're right about the silence," the message read. After the Diddy case, there were meetings people were told who to distance from. Ellen's name was on that list. It was exactly the kind of confirmation Joe had suspected existed. The next episode of his podcast opened with him saying, "Someone reached out to me last night, and if what they're saying is true, this isn't about Ellen being cancelled, it's about control." He never named his source, but the audience could sense he was treading dangerous ground. His guest that day, a journalist, looked visibly uncomfortable, saying, "Joe, if what you're hearing is real, you're playing with fire." Joe shrugged and said, "Then why are so many people pretending nothing happened?" That moment went viral, once again dragging Elon's name back into the headlines. And then something strange happened. Within 24 hours, multiple clips from Joe's show discussing Ellen disappeared from YouTube. Entire segments were muted or removed. Fans started reporting the takedowns, calling it censorship. Joe addressed it briefly, saying his team was looking into it. But everyone knew what that meant. The story had officially crossed a line. People began claiming that Elon's representatives had issued quiet legal notices to certain platforms. Others believed the networks behind her show were trying to suppress any link between her and the Diddy narrative. Even a few Hollywood gossip columnists admitted off record that they'd been told not to pursue anything involving Ellen DeGeneres at the moment. But the more they tried to bury it, the louder Joe's audience grew. Fans began spotting Ellen's former associates in interviews, avoiding her name altogether, acting nervous or dismissive whenever asked. One even slipped up during a morning show, accidentally referring to her as retired for her safety, before quickly correcting to retired from television. That clip spread like wildfire. Joe replayed it on his next episode, smiling as he said, "You can't make this stuff up. For her safety, what does that even mean?" His laughter echoed, but his tone wasn't entirely joking. People began noticing that even Joe's own demeanor had shifted. What started as curiosity was turning into quiet defiance. He seemed determined to expose something bigger than a talk show host's disappearance. The internet started pulling in other named celebrities connected to both Ellen and Diddy, who also seemed unusually quiet. It was as if Hollywood had collectively agreed to erase an entire chapter of its own history. Joe described it as the Great Silence, comparing it to how powerful figures once manipulated the press to control narratives. "We think we live in a free information age," he said. "But all it takes is one phone call from the right person, and the truth disappears." His words struck a nerve. Fans began coordinating online archives to preserve every deleted clip, interview, and article about Elon's ties to the scene. They created mirrors, backups, and drive folders labeled Ellen Vault. The movement grew overnight. Joe never publicly endorsed it, but the timing of his smirk when asked about it told fans everything they needed to know. And just when people thought the mystery had peaked, a new piece of footage surfaced, grainy, shaky, clearly taken from a distance. It allegedly showed Ellen leaving a gated property in Malibu late at night, escorted by two men who looked like private security. Her face was partially covered, but her posture was unmistakable. The uploader claimed the clip was filmed only days after Joe's first comment about her. People flooded the comments, saying she looked terrified and on edge. One top comment read, "Joe was right. She didn't disappear, she was told to." The footage spread across every platform before it was eventually taken down, but the screenshots, as always, stayed. Joe's podcast community discussed it endlessly, piecing together timelines, cross-referencing every rumor with old records. Each discovery only deepened the tension. Ellen DeGeneres, once the queen of daytime television, had become the symbol of Hollywood's quiet exodus, the celebrities who simply fade away, leaving more questions than answers. And Joe Rogan, by asking one simple question, had pulled back a curtain no one was supposed to touch. Fans didn't just want gossip anymore, they wanted truth, or at least the illusion of it. Every day, more people tuned in, waiting for Joe to say something new, to drop another name, to confirm another whisper. The line between speculation and revelation blurred completely, and Hollywood was left trembling under the pressure of a story that refused to die. The third week after Joe's remark, things took a darker turn. People had grown obsessed, combing through every second of Ellen's past interviews like detectives searching for coded messages. Entire Reddit threads were dedicated to decoding her expressions, the pauses in her laughter, the way she looked away when guests mentioned certain parties or names. One thread focused on a 2019 segment where Diddy had surprised Ellen on her show, bringing flowers and champagne for her birthday. Back then, it was just another viral moment. But now, fans noticed how Ellen's smile seemed strained. her laugh slightly forced. One user slowed the clip to half speed and pointed out a brief exchange, a whisper barely audible under the audience's cheers. "You're still in, right?" Diddy appeared to murmur. Ellen nodded quickly before changing the subject. Whether the audio was real or not didn't matter, people believed it. The narrative had taken on a life of its own. Joe Rogan addressed the viral clip cautiously. He didn't confirm or deny anything but said, "You gotta admit, that's a weird interaction for two people who were supposedly just friends." His guest that night, a music industry insider, shifted uncomfortably before saying, "There's a reason certain friendships go silent all of a sudden." The internet exploded again. Viewers clipped that exact line and spread it everywhere. Memes, reaction videos, breakdown analysis it became digital wildfire. The phrase "there's a reason certain friendships go silent" trended for days. While Elon's fanbase tried desperately to defend her, some said she was just exhausted, traumatized from the media backlash over her show's toxic workplace allegations. But others insisted she was silenced by forces far beyond daytime television. Behind the scenes, several former employees started receiving calls from unknown numbers. One ex-writer told an independent reporter that she was warned not to give interviews about Ellen or risk career consequences. That quote made its way into an online magazine, only to vanish hours later when the article was mysteriously deleted. The author posted on X, saying she was told to let it go. Joe mentioned it briefly on air, shaking his head as he said, "It's amazing how stories disappear faster than they appear." Fans started screenshotting everything, determined not to lose another piece of the puzzle. They noticed that every time Joe talked about Ellen or Diddy, his clips faced sudden technical issues, buffering, muted sections, broken uploads. It was too consistent to be coincidence. Meanwhile, a rumor began circulating about a private event that had allegedly taken place in the Hollywood Hills years ago, a gathering hosted by Diddy and attended by a select group of TV personalities, producers, and musicians. Ellen's name appeared on the supposed guest list. An anonymous former attendee posted a message saying that after the Diddy investigation began, every person on that list either lost a show, went silent, or distanced themselves from Hollywood. Joe read that post during one of his off-air conversations and said later, "If that's real, we're talking about something coordinated, not random." By now, his listeners were obsessed. Independent journalists began digging through corporate filings and property records, trying to trace Elon's recent moves. Someone discovered that a luxury estate in Montecito had quietly been sold under a different name, allegedly connected to Ellen's trust. Speculation grew that she had relocated to a private compound in Portugal, the same location where a few other Hollywood retirees were rumored to have fled. Joe mentioned the Portugal rumor jokingly, but even he seemed intrigued. "If she's hiding out in Europe, that's a long way from a simple retirement," he said. His guest chuckled nervously and replied, "Or maybe she's safer there." The comment drew a wave of unease from viewers. Fans began noticing subtle shifts in Joe's behavior too. He started keeping certain topics vague, using phrases like "you know who I'm talking about" or "that other situation." It felt like he was protecting himself while still feeding the audience's curiosity. Some accused him of backing down, while others believed he was being watched. Conspiracy channels claimed he'd received direct warnings from Hollywood insiders to drop the subject. One even alleged that Joe's studio was visited by people from up top, though no proof ever surfaced. The lack of evidence only made the rumors stronger. Joe finally addressed it in one of his most viewed episodes, saying, "If they didn't want people asking questions, they shouldn't have buried her story." His tone was calm, almost defiant, and that calmness made it all the more chilling. The internet responded like a battlefield. Half the people cheered Joe on for exposing Hollywood's silence, while the other half warned he was treading on dangerous ground. Some fans started sending him messages saying they'd noticed cars parked outside their homes after posting about Ellen and Diddy. One woman even claimed her Instagram account was deleted after she shared screenshots of an alleged DM exchange between Ellen and a well-known record producer. Joe didn't comment on that claim directly, but during the next episode, he sighed and said, "There's a reason people disappear. The system doesn't delete at our races." That line hit like thunder. Clips of it spread to every corner of the internet, turning Joe into both a folk hero and a target of outrage. And then came the biggest shock yet. A man claiming to be a former bodyguard for A-list celebrities appeared anonymously on a livestream and said, "Ellen wasn't just a TV host. She was a connector. She introduced people. She kept lists." His voice was distorted, his face hidden. He refused to give names, but when pressed about the connection to Diddy, he said only, they were part of the same social circle. And once that circle got exposed, they told everyone to disappear. The livestream was taken down within the hour, but the clip was already everywhere. Joe saw it, and though he didn't confirm its legitimacy, he looked deeply unsettled. On his next podcast, he said, "That voice sounded scared. You can tell when someone's remembering, not inventing." Ellen's old friends began avoiding interviews altogether. Her once loyal celebrity allies either claimed they hadn't spoken to her in years or brushed off the topic entirely. Alisters who once praised her began removing old posts featuring her. Hollywood was scrubbing itself clean. The absence became so noticeable that even late-night talk shows started joking nervously about it. One host quipped, "Ellen's probably on vacation with Bigfoot," but his laughter didn't land. The room felt heavy. People could sense that something deeper had taken hold of the industry, a fear that whatever Joe had stirred might not stop with Ellen. By now, Joe's studio felt more like a bunker than a podcast set. Fans noted the darker lighting, the quieter tone, the way he seemed to measure every word. "You ever feel like you stumbled into a story you weren't supposed to see?" he asked one evening. His guest nodded slowly, replying, "It's not what's being said, it's what's being protected." That became another viral line. Ellen's silence, which once felt like avoidance, now looked strategic. And while Joe never accused her directly of wrongdoing, he kept returning to one point. The question isn't what she did. The question is why everyone stopped talking about her the moment they started talking about Diddy. In Hollywood, silence speaks louder than confession. And as Joe's audience grew, so did the feeling that Elon's vanishing act was only the beginning. Something was unraveling. Something too big for headlines and too dangerous for daytime TV. The industry that once adored her was now pretending she had never existed, while Joe Rogan's single question kept echoing through millions of minds. Peaked, a new piece of footage surfaced, grainy, shaky, clearly taken from a distance. It allegedly showed Ellen leaving a gated property in Malibu late at night, escorted by two men who looked like private security. Her face was partially covered, but her posture was unmistakable. The uploader claimed the clip was filmed only days after Joe's first comment about her. People flooded the comments, saying she looked terrified and on edge. One top comment read, "Joe was right. She didn't disappear, she was told to." The footage spread across every platform before it was eventually taken down. But the screenshots, as always, stayed. Joe's podcast community discussed it endlessly, piecing together timelines, cross-referencing every rumor with old records. Each discovery only deepened the tension. Ellen DeGeneres, once the queen of daytime television, had become the symbol of Hollywood's quiet exodus, the celebrities who simply fade away, leaving more questions than answers.